This is the North Star Takes podcast with Bailey Policki and Jacob Liberta. You can find all our videos here on our YouTube channel, so if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you're a Timberwolves fan, be sure to give this video a like. Today we're going to be discussing the Timberwolves. They're off to a 2-1 start after kind of a disappointing loss to the New Orleans Pelicans at home. And, we could get into the nitty-gritty of the basketball conversation, like on the court stuff, but I kind of want to touch on the broader, larger picture, I guess, when it comes to this team. It was just an ugly game overall, this third game against the Pelicans. Very uninspiring, besides Ant's third quarter, where he just absolutely went off. Tried to bring the team back the best he could, but they were just down by too much and couldn't quite complete the comeback. Once again, D'Angelo Russell didn't show up. He's had two really bad games in a row. And, Cat getting in foul trouble again, complaining to the refs, all that jazz. We'll get into it. But the post-game comments is what really caught my attention, because Anthony Edwards basically said, enough is enough with this crap. Us three, him, talking about the big three on the team, basically said, we can't be ball hogs. We need to be passing to our teammates. He wants to hold people accountable, it sounds like. So do you think this is already kind of shifting into where Anthony Edwards is going to – because we've talked about this before, how he's probably the alpha when it comes to the locker room. I mean, maybe Pat Bev is now, but I would say Ant is probably the alpha between the big three, especially just the way he carries himself, his demeanor. So would you say this is already shifting in year two to becoming Anthony Edwards' team?
Yeah, I totally agree. And as the two of us like to do with any of our teams, we always like to look at the big picture. And I feel like we already kind of identified that during the offseason, or maybe during the end of last season, really. I mean, it felt pretty clear that Ant was the driving force as far as our success went at the end of last season. And you could just tell in press conferences that this guy just has an alpha personality. And I think this guy, he just exudes confidence. And I think it's just a lot more. He's a lot louder than guys like D'Lo and Cat, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. But at the same time, I think everybody's got to accept that in the locker room internally too. That Ant is kind of turning into the leader now, and everybody's got to get behind him. And I think he can definitely be the leader on this team to get us through these hard times and help us overcome adversity. And when we get in these situations like this, where you have a bad game against a team you probably should win against at home, albeit it's still early, you're still figuring things out. That's all right. I can understand that. But at the same time, I think definitely this press conference was a sign of things to come, that Ant is really going to take over this locker room and start being a louder voice internally behind closed doors. So I think it's definitely a changing of the guard, I would say.
Yeah, and so people are probably wondering, well, how do you not think Cat is still the leader of this team? And Cat's always been a guy that tries to lead by example, lead with his play, let his play do the talking.
And we need some of that.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Cat is a very good player. Once again, he just puts up a crazy box score when it doesn't even seem like it. But the main problem I have with him is every year he talks about how he's not going to get on the officials. He's going to do a better job of remaining calm because he knows that it's going to get him and his team in trouble. Mm-hmm. And once again, early on this season, all he's doing is granted, the refs were absolutely horrible. They were an atrocity.
Oh, they screwed him in both New Orleans games. Yeah.
I would just like to say Ed Malloy is the worst professional official I've ever seen in my life. So I'm just going to throw that out there. He did a horrific job.
Don't hold back.
But it's still Cat's got to rise above that. A true leader, okay, you can get upset at the first one, but and then he gets that awful offensive illegal screen, just across half court. And then he freaks out, gets a technical, and it's oh my goodness. And you could just tell it was snowballing from there. And that just throws the whole team off their game because now Cat's out in the first quarter already. And so that just throws the whole thing off kilter. And then you couple that with D'Angelo Russell having another horrible shooting night, turning the ball over, really providing nothing if he's not scoring. That's the main issue I've had with D'Lo is if he's not scoring, he's not playmaking either. And it just feels like he's disengaged from the game if his shots aren't falling. So I kind of have an issue with the way I don't know, just the way D'Lo has been carrying himself. It's man, you need to accept, because I think he still thinks he's the second best player on this team and he deserves to get the shots and all that, which he can still take shots, but he needs to realize that he is the third best player on this team. And this team runs through Ant first and then Cat. You could argue it runs through Cat first because when he's not on the floor, they're a disaster. But at the same time, I think Ant is the spark that kind of gets this team going. And so without a doubt, it runs through those two before it runs through D'Lo. And I think he just needs to kind of readjust his game to reflect that, because I think he needs to become more of a passer and a playmaker rather than a 20-point per game scorer.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what I was just going to say. I'm glad that you brought up the whole when Cat's off the floor, the offense is a disaster thing, just because I think that's very true. That's why Cat, we got to have him on the floor and not getting so consumed with the officials, even though they are screwing him over. He can't get so emotional about it. So then he can't stay on the floor and not get stupid fouls and
Yep.
do things like that. That's going to take him out of the game because. Like you said, it's just everything runs through him. Everything's so Cat centralized that, for one, we don't have any depth as far as bigs go for the on this roster besides Cat. So beyond Cat, like, it gets a little bit rough. And then when you're
Yep.
talking about our other stars playing, then it's like if Ant, for instance, with this Pelicans game, Ant doesn't have any driving lanes if Cat's not in the game, because if Cat's not in the game, then he's not taking Valanciunas out of the paint. And if Valanciunas is just sitting there, then Ant's not going to be able to
Yep.
make a lot happen around the rim. And then as far as D'Lo goes, he honestly plays his best, or some of his best ball, I would say, in the pick and roll. And
Mm-hmm.
if Cat's not out there, then we probably don't have a great pick and roll situation for him either. So I don't think it just doesn't work for the rest of the team just beyond Cat if Cat's not on the floor to make everything happen.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of going back to the leadership part of it, like, that's the issue I have with Cat is if he thinks he's the leader of this team, which based off his quotes, he sure seems to think so. Like, oh, I have to lead by example. I have to lead by my play. Well, that's not sending a good message to the rest of your team when you're doing stuff like that. That's the issue I have with it, because basically 2 games in a row, you know you're going to struggle with Jonas Valanciunas. So you, and like, especially on the offensive end, like, Cat has so many offensive fouls. Like, he needs to learn to control his body better. He needs to be conscious of this stuff, because the second he gets like 2 quick fouls, he's sitting down on the bench. And then,
Mm.
like you just talked about, the team is so much worse off when he's not on the floor. And so he costs his team by just doing silly stuff, even if in the moment he's heated, getting a technical foul or getting 2 quick fouls, or just not being smart about how he's defending Valanciunas or how he's going at Valanciunas on offense. It's like, Cat's historically struggled with guys this big. You look at like Steven Adams, Valanciunas is obviously a good one. Even Embiid, he's had some tough battles with. So, like, I mean, there's going to be teams you come across that are going to be big like this, and I'm kind of curious how he's going to come out against the Bucks. Honestly, with Giannis in there, I saw Brooke Lopez. It's looking like he's going to be out. I think he's injured right now, but so the Wolves might have an opportunity to strike there. But I don't know, man. Cat's got to find a way to adjust his game here, because it's not going to get any easier. People know that they can get under his skin.
Oh, I totally agree. And Giannis is going to be a tall task. Obviously, this guy's a two-time MVP, and he's he's no slouch, even though he's
Yeah.
not quite your typical big man, like especially not at the five. But at the same time, like, I think that's going to be a handful for Cat both ways. So
For
he
sure.
better be ready to go for that game. But kind of snowballing off this, and I forgot to add this point when we were talking about D'Lo, but the one thing I'll give him credit for is I do appreciate how he owned up on Saturday after the game. He played an awful had an awful performance, and he came
Yeah.
out after the game and said, I basically forgot how to play basketball tonight. So that was unacceptable, and that can't happen again. I appreciate him taking accountability of that and coming to everybody and telling them that. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you got to also fix that too, not just say
Yes.
these things. So
Yeah.
I think we need to see that moving forward as well.
That's the issue that I've had with the Wolves for the last few years now. It's like, oh, like, we know we need to play better defense. We know we need to play
Go
harder.
do it.
Yeah. But no, and like Kat says earlier in the offseason, he's like, enough of the talk. Like, it's time to go do it. And I don't disagree. Cat and D'Lo, you're in year 7. And Cat, there's no doubt. I think I saw today he's 4th in the NBA in scoring. Like, Cat's having a phenomenal box score season. Really, he
Mhm.
just needs to stay out of foul trouble, and I think he's fine. Um, D'Lo, on the other hand, I mean, he's just so inconsistent, and we've seen shades of this. He's been with the team for parts of 3 seasons now. We've seen shades of this before, but we haven't like seen a prolonged period of him and Cat playing together. Well, now you throw Ant into this mix, so now it's like a 3-man thing, and it's tough because, like, obviously he wants to get his shots in, but if he's not hitting his shots, it feels like he's forcing so he can get it going. And then like guys like McDaniels and Beasley and Torian Prince, those guys suffer, not getting enough of their shots, because between D'Lo, Ant, and Cat, that's a lot of the shots right there.
That's a lot of volume for sure. And I did like how Ant said that they got to take it upon themselves to get everybody involved because we do have some other talented players on this team beyond just those
Yes.
three that are plenty capable, and you got to be able to trust them if we're going to go anywhere this season. So that's got to start now, and the basically building a foundation at the beginning of the season when everything's really coming together for all these teams in the NBA, not just ours. So I
Yep.
think it's going to be huge, and yeah, just it's going to be critical to get guys, especially like Beasley. I think this guy's a prolific scorer, and I think
Yes.
the quicker you can get him going, the better. Just because he's a valuable asset to have when, especially when like you get situations like last night where you're down 11 with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and you need as much scoring as possible, especially in a hurry. And Beasley, I would argue, is probably your most like not this year. Obviously, we haven't seen that. I think he's still revving back up, but I
Yep.
think he's probably your most consistent 3-point shooter after Cat. So
Yeah.
I think that you got to get him going however you can do it and just put the ball in his hands and let him also get his shots because, like I said, it just goes beyond this big three.
Yeah, I agree. If you can unlock Beasley, that's massive. Because I mean, there was a while last year he was the best player on our team. Granted, with injuries and such involved to our best players, but
Still,
I mean,
he
he
was
was scoring
phenomenal.
20 points a game before he got that suspension, and then he eventually got hurt. So
Hmm.
he was very good. I agree. You got to unlock him. I think we got to see more from McDaniels as well.
Sure.
He needs to be more aggressive. He's really only taking like wide open jump shots, which yeah, it's kind of a nice role for him. But I'd still like to see him get around 10 points a game, 10 to 12. Pick it up from where he's been at around like 4 or 5 or something. So
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they have stuff to figure out. Like they haven't had a ton of time playing as this whole collective group. So I
That's a
mean,
good point.
you can only think it's going to get better as it goes. But I mean, with
Mhm.
how well they did in the preseason and how great everything looked in game one, it was just kind of tough to see them revert back to not looking so good against a Pelicans team that's really not that good either.
For sure. And gotta give the Pelicans credit too. I think they came out honestly in both of these games they just grinded. Like I think they're playing pretty desperate as some of the writers around the Wolves are saying, and I
Yep.
think that definitely played into it too. But at the same time, we I think we're more talented than the Pelicans are right now, especially without Zion. So I
Yes.
think those are games we need to win. But I'll cut them a little slack being this early in the season. That just kind of happens like that sometimes. But and you're going to drop games every now and then to teams who are worse than you for sure. But
Yep.
it's just you'd like it to look better than it really has or really did in this last game.
So when it comes to the big three, like I feel like Ant and Cat play really well together. Like even if Ant is the alpha and he is like the number one option, like Cat still gets his. Like Cat still scores 30 points. He still gets his 12 to 14 rebounds.
Sure.
Do you think so? Obviously, like him and Cat, their dynamic is fine because they're both scoring, they're both contributing. Do you
Mhm.
think D'Lo just needs to take a step back and kind of assess the situation and just kind of reconfigure where he's at in this offense? Because he needs to realize like I'm for sure the third option. So how can I set these other two up? And I think what also he needs to realize is if those other two are going, he's going to get some open looks as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there. That I think there needs to be a reevaluation of this shot distribution here and who's taking all these shots in from late in game, like there was this in this past one. Just because I think uh, when you said Ant is going and Cat is going too, then it's like then there shouldn't really be a lot of shots being put up by D'Lo unless he's wide open because
Exactly.
it's just gotta the ball's got to be in Ant's hands and for sure, and then Cat too. I mean he'll get his fill regardless, but
Yep.
yeah, it's really hard to contextualize right now, I guess, because it's like what does that really look like as far as like what does that mean? D'Lo taking a step back, but I guess it's just more playmaking. But that's the thing is it's hard to think about too because D'Lo that his number one thing is probably shooting that he can just heat up
Yes.
like a microwave sometimes. So it's kind of hard to morph him into slightly something else, but at the same time, I think that's what's going to happen for this team to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the problem is that the initial path was okay, we're gonna have D'Angelo Russell, our scoring point guard, and Cat, who's an elite center. Well,
Yep.
then you draft Anthony Edwards, and all of a sudden you have a potential elite all around player. And because he's getting boards and stuff this year, he's getting some assists. Like
Yeah.
Ant's a very good all around player. And I think that just kind of throws a wrench into everything because when he becomes your best player or second best player, he's taking those touches from D'Angelo Russell. And then Russell's taking it from other, role players that are important to get rolling too. So I
Mhm.
think it's a balance they just have to figure out. And if anyone can figure it out, I think it's Chris Finch. I have a lot of faith in him.
Yeah, he definitely seems like he got a good head on his shoulders, and he'll figure it out. I think he's going to get the most whatever this roster's got, and if we're in a good spot for the trade deadline, maybe we'll add, and then he can do even more, and maybe we can really assert ourselves in this Western Conference, wherever that may be, whether it be the play-in or maybe we lock ourselves into a spot in the playoffs to begin with, if we're fortunate enough. But
Yeah.
I think I definitely feel like Finch's leadership is evident out there, and I'm really like when I was saying through 3 games as far as the coaching goes. But
Yep.
the one thing I would question, I guess, a little bit is maybe in this loss Beverly could have played more at
Yeah.
the end, just because he was literally the only guy hitting shots at any sort of consistency. So I think he could have definitely gotten in the mix there. But at the same time, I get it that maybe you want to get, for instance, they put Beasley in there,
Hmm.
and maybe you feel like he wouldn't play good enough off D'Lo and Ant, but at the same time, I don't know. It just felt like he should have been in the game when honestly I thought he had a hot hand.
Yeah, I think as of now, I think Finch just feels like he kind of has to roll with his guys who are at top of the pecking order. But eventually, it's going to get to the point where if D'Lo is not playing well, he's not going to be in there to close a game. And like honestly, I didn't think he was deserving to close a game last night. And it could have been Pat Bev and you could have kept Beasley in there too.
Yeah.
So and like even the previous game, the second game, you could argue D'Lo didn't deserve to be in there. Granted, he hit a couple big shots to help secure the win. So that's kind of what you get with him. It's like he can hit the clutch shots, but he also, just disappears for a little while. So
Mhm.
he's kind of an enigma. And I mean, I really hope for the sake of, him and Kat being good friends and just kind of the whole vibe of the team, like hopefully they can figure this out because it'd really be a shame to have to, consider ditching D'Angelo Russell after this season or at the trade deadline or whatever.
For sure. And yeah, I think 3 games in isn't exactly the time to really get too crazy about
Yeah.
roster construction yet. Like, obviously, there's holes here, but I feel like there isn't really any surprises there. Like, kind of identified these before the season, been like, hey, these are going to be problems, but it's not a complete roster. And
Hmm.
I think we just gotta see how this plays out over a more significant time span, whether that be like probably 20, 30 games or something like that. And then we'll be able
Hmm.
to reassess and see where we're at and see if this big three is really going to work or not. I mean, obviously, maybe even 20, 30 games isn't enough, but
Yep.
still, it might give you a good inkling.
Yeah, you would hope so at that point. And then of course the trade deadline will be rolling around. So they'll figure it out. I have confidence that this team is still going to be good. I mean, the talent is there. So as long as they can just kind
Yes.
of put it all together, the defense has been much improved. So
Hmm.
if they can somehow acquire some size to help out with the, rebounding, and if D'Lo and Beasley can start getting going on offense, that'll change things drastically. So
For sure. And I think it's been amazing watching us force turnovers as much as we have. I think we've
yes.
definitely been all over the place there with generating steals and offensive fouls, taking charges. Like it's great to see.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a new look Wolves team, so it's fun to see from that aspect. And then once the offense gets rolling, maybe
Hmm.
we'll become a wagon. Who knows? So,
Let's hope.
um, that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Once again, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please do so. Give this video a like, as it'll help us reach more Timberwolves fans. Leave your comments below how you're feeling about the leadership of this team. Do you think this is Ant's team now? Do you still think it's Cat's team? What are your opinions on D'Lo and some of the other role players? So yeah, and then feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram. And thanks for watching.